it's spoiled, so he gets annoyed when people are indecisive.
Gene was the best actor that I'd ever worked with. And I remember as I was walking out to my car on MGM lot, Gene was getting in and he goes, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And I walked over and he goes, "Look, man, if you ever do that in front of me again, I'm just gonna, the way you disrespect, I'm just gonna tear you."
Hollywood's greatest method actor became its most feared enforcer.
He was a tough nut, Gene Hackman, but he was really good. And he was really difficult. We can say it now, but he was a tough guy.
Behind every masterful performance was a man who terrorized directors, walked off sets, and made John Travolta's life hell.
And I've watched him with other directors, and he'll get really annoying.
What happened when Hollywood's most uncompromising perfectionist finally met actors who refused to back down? Let's get into it. In 1995, Gene Hackman was at the peak of his powers. 2 Oscar wins, legendary performances in The French Connection and Unforgiven, and a reputation as one of the finest actors of his generation. When Barry Sonnenfeld cast him opposite John Travolta in Get Shorty, it seemed like the perfect pairing. The grizzled veteran and the newly resurrected star fresh off his Pulp Fiction comeback. But from the very first day of filming, disaster was brewing.
Gene, I've worked with Gene, and the same thing, but he's so ready to go. He's so prepared that the first scene I ever did with him was with Morgan Freeman and Gene, both excellent actors.
Hackman arrived on set having memorized not just his lines, but every other actor's lines, every camera angle, every blocking detail. He'd spent his weekend studying 8 pages of dialogue until he could perform them flawlessly. This wasn't unusual for Hackman. It was his standard operating procedure, honed through decades of theatrical training and military discipline. Then John Travolta walked onto the set, riding high on his post-Pulp Fiction renaissance, but carrying the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced a true perfectionist. "How was your weekend?" Travolta casually asked Hackman during their first rehearsal, expecting the usual Hollywood small talk. What happened next would become Hollywood legend and forever change how actors approach working with Hackman. Hackman, stone-faced and furious, responded with ice-cold precision. "I spent the whole weekend memorizing 8 effing pages of dialogue." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, the entire crew suddenly understanding they were witnessing something far beyond a simple exchange. Travolta's reply was the spark that ignited the explosion. "Well, that's a waste of a weekend." What Travolta didn't understand was that he was facing an actor who had literally walked off The French Connection after 2 days because director William Friedkin was pushing him too hard. This was a man who demanded excellence not just from himself, but from everyone around him, viewing unprepared actors as a personal insult to the craft he'd spent his life mastering. As filming progressed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Travolta would fumble lines, forget blocking, and destroy the precise timing that Hackman had spent hours perfecting. Each blown take was like a fault on Hackman's professionalism, his jaw tightening visibly as his legendary temper began to simmer. Director Barry Sonnenfeld watched in growing horror as his star became increasingly agitated. Gene was a consummate actor, both technically and artistically, so he came to set every day knowing his lines. Sonnenfeld later recalled, "John came to set not knowing his lines, probably not having read the script the night before." The breaking point came during a critical scene between their characters. After multiple takes ruined by Travolta's unprepared performance, with Hackman delivering flawless work only to watch it destroyed by his co-star's fumbling, the 2-time Oscar winner exploded in a fury of profanity that left the entire crew stunned. In a tirade ostensibly directed at Sonnenfeld, but clearly meant for Travolta, Hackman berated everyone involved for their unprofessionalism and lack of preparation. He accused the director of not knowing how to direct, of listening to his wife for advice, and of allowing the production to descend into amateur hour chaos. Production ground to a halt. The crew retreated to the lawn, playing frisbee and drinking coffee while waiting for the storm to pass. Sonnenfeld's wife was reduced to tears by the verbal. Travolta, finally understanding the magnitude of his miscalculation, began frantically studying his lines. The message was crystal clear. This was Hackman's set now, and everyone would operate by his uncompromising standards or face the consequences. The incident became legendary in Hollywood circles, a cautionary tale about the price of coming unprepared when working with true professionals. Yet ironically, the film that emerged from this toxic environment became a classic, with Hackman's performance as sleazy producer Harry Zim earning widespread acclaim. If the Get Shorty incident was a glimpse into Hackman's volcanic temperament, his clash with Wes Anderson on The Royal Tenenbaums revealed the full extent of his capacity for psychological warfare. This wasn't just professional disagreement. This was a systematic campaign of intimidation designed to break a young director's spirit. Anderson was everything Hackman despised in modern filmmakers: young, meticulous, obsessed with control, and completely inexperienced with handling strong-willed actors. At 32, Anderson had made only 2 feature films, while Hackman had been terrorizing sets since before Anderson was born.
And I remember in the middle of a take, Gene is doing this. He says, I can see you frowning and moving around over there. And I go, okay, I'm going to set up a monitor and I'll get over here.
From day one, Hackman made his disdain for Anderson's methods brutally clear. During takes, he would watch Anderson frowning and moving around behind the camera, disrupting his concentration with hostile stare and theatrical sighs. When Anderson tried to give direction, Hackman would cut him off with withering looks and dismissive body language that communicated his contempt more effectively than words ever could. But the real psychological assault began when cameras weren't rolling. According to multiple sources on set, Hackman embarked on a campaign of verbal intimidation designed to test whether Anderson had the backbone to survive Hollywood's brutal realities. The attacks were personal and vicious.
And Gene was really rough on Wes, and I used to kind of step in there and just, try to defend my friend.
The situation became so toxic that Bill Murray, himself no stranger to difficult behavior and psychological gamesmanship, felt compelled to intervene. Murray began showing up on his days off specifically to protect Anderson from Hackman's attacks, a remarkable gesture from an actor who typically avoided unnecessary set drama. The irony was devastating. While Hackman was systematically destroying Anderson's confidence, he was simultaneously delivering one of the greatest performances of his career. His Royal Tenenbaum was a lying, manipulative patriarch who somehow remained sympathetic despite his terrible behavior. Art imitating life in the most uncomfortable way possible. But Hackman's hostility wasn't random cruelty. It was strategic warfare with a specific purpose rooted in his own brutal experiences breaking into Hollywood. He was testing Anderson's resolve, pushing him to see if the director would crack under pressure or fight back with the strength necessary to survive in an industry that devoured the weak. In Hackman's twisted worldview, shaped by decades of rejection and his own father's abandonment, weakness was unforgivable. He would rather destroy a production than work with someone he considered unworthy of the craft he'd spent his life mastering. The psychological toll on Anderson was enormous. Crew members reported seeing the director visibly shaken after particularly brutal encounters with Hackman. Several experienced professionals requested never to work with the actor again, their careers solid enough to afford such luxury. Yet the performance that emerged from this toxic environment became legendary. Hackman's Royal earned him a Golden Globe and served as a perfect capstone to his career, proving that his methods, however cruel, produced undeniable results. The film's success validated his approach while simultaneously highlighting its human cost. Before Hackman terrorized co-stars and dominated directors, he first had to survive his own complete psychological breakdown. The story of The French Connection reveals the moment when Hollywood's future enforcer was pushed to his absolute breaking point. and nearly walked away from the role that would define his career and establish his reputation as both a genius and a monster. Director William Friedkin had a serious problem. His first choice for Detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle had fallen through, and he was left scrambling to cast one of the most psychologically demanding roles in 1970s cinema. When Gene Hackman's name came up, Friedkin was deeply skeptical. The actor was known for his intensity and stage-trained discipline. But could he handle the brutal psychological territory the role demanded? The answer came with shocking swiftness on day 2 of filming. Hackman quit. The role of Popeye Doyle was based on real-life detective Eddie Egan, a racist, violent cop whose methods horrified even hardened police officers who thought they'd seen everything. Egan was a man who operated outside the law while supposedly enforcing it, using intimidation, brutality, psychological manipulation to get results. The character represented everything dark about American law enforcement in the 1970s. Hackman, despite his growing reputation for playing tough guys and morally ambiguous characters, was struggling with Doyle's unflinching viciousness. He didn't want to go there, Friedkin later revealed, describing how the actor recoiled from the character's racism and casual cruelty. But Friedkin wasn't about to lose his leading man without a fight. In a decision that would become legendary for its ruthlessness and psychological sophistication, the director began a warfare campaign designed to break Hackman down completely and rebuild him as Popeye Doyle. Friedkin would sneer at Hackman between takes, deliberately insulting his acting ability and questioning his commitment to trigger the rage needed for the role. The director understood that Hackman's anger was his greatest asset as a performer, and he was willing to become the enemy to access it. The strategy was incredibly dangerous. Friedkin knew about Hackman's troubled childhood, his father's abandonment when he was 13, and his innate problem with authority figures dating back to his disastrous military service. Push him too hard and Hackman would either explode in violence or simply disappear forever. But Friedkin calculated that Hackman's artistic integrity and deep-seated need to prove himself would ultimately triumph over his defensive instincts. It was a high-stakes psychological gamble that could have destroyed both their careers. After days of psychological manipulation and emotional brutality, Hackman and Friedkin reached a tentative understanding. The director would continue pushing buttons and challenging boundaries, but only in service of creating an unforgettable performance. It was a devil's bargain that would create cinematic magic while establishing a template for Hackman's future conflicts. Even after returning to the production, Hackman continued to abandon the set whenever scenes became too emotionally intense. The crew learned to expect sudden walkouts during the most challenging moments, followed by long delays while Hackman composed himself off camera and summoned the courage to continue. The performance that emerged from this psychological torture was absolutely transcendent. Hackman's Popeye Doyle was a force of nature, racist, violent, obsessed, and utterly compelling. He created a character who was simultaneously reprehensible and magnetic, forcing audiences to confront their own complicity in systemic violence. The Academy recognized the achievement immediately, awarding Hackman the Oscar for Best Actor and establishing him as one of the greatest performers of his generation. But the experience also revealed something darker about his artistic process. He had learned that conflict and confrontation could produce extraordinary art, that pushing boundaries to their breaking point often yielded the most honest and powerful results. The lesson would shape every subsequent production and relationship in his career. By 1978, Gene Hackman was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. His Oscar-winning performance in The French Connection, having established him as the definitive tough guy actor of the decade. When director Richard Donner offered him the role of Lex Luthor in Superman, it seemed like a perfect match. The greatest villain in comics played by one of cinema's most formidable and uncompromising actors. But Hackman had conditions that would test the limits of Hollywood's willingness to accommodate star power and challenge decades of comic book tradition. the first demand was absolutely non-negotiable. He would not shave his head. Despite more than 40 years of comic book tradition depicting Lex Luthor as completely bald, Hackman flatly refused to alter his appearance in any way. He wouldn't even wear a bald cap, claiming it would interfere with his performance and compromise his ability to fully inhabit the character. This wasn't vanity or ego, it was about fundamental control and artistic autonomy. Hackman had built his entire career on the principle that his craft came first, everything else second. Costume requirements, makeup demands, even decades of established character tradition meant absolutely nothing compared to his vision of how the role should be approached. Richard Donner found himself in a seemingly impossible position. How do you create cinema's most famous bald villain with an actor who absolutely refuses to be bald? The studio was investing unprecedented money in the project, expecting Hackman to deliver a performance that would anchor the entire Superman franchise for years to come. The solution became one of the most creative and subversive compromises in film history. Rather than fight Hackman directly or risk losing him entirely, Donner embraced the absurdity and turned it into character development. Donner had Hackman tease and comb his hair into an obviously artificial style that looked like the world's worst toupee. The effect was both ridiculous and brilliant. Luthor appeared to be wearing a hairpiece so bad it was clearly intentional, adding layers of vanity and self-deception to the character that had never existed in the comics. Only in the final scene, when Luthor is being escorted to prison, is he shown truly bald. And even then, it's achieved through careful camera angles rather than actually shaving Hackman's head. But Hackman's rebellion went far deeper than cosmetic concerns. He was challenging the entire comic book movie establishment, proving that star power and artistic vision could override decades of source material and fan expectations. The message to future productions was unmistakably clear. If you want Gene Hackman, you play by Gene Hackman's rules, period.
Not that he goes downhill, just that what he actually really wants, what I feel like he wants to do is do it great immediately and move on. And you know, he's somebody who you can do that.
Yeah, you can do that with him. So it's spoiled. So
The performance became iconic precisely because of its unconventional approach. Hackman's Luthor was urbane, sophisticated, and wickedly funny, a far cry from the bombastic, scenery-chewing villains of earlier superhero films. He brought a level of intelligence, charisma, and psychological complexity to the role that elevated the entire production beyond typical genre entertainment. Critics immediately recognized the genius, praising his effective light touch, and noting how he made Luthor humorous but not out-and-out comical. The performance proved that Hackman's instincts were consistently superior to conventional wisdom. His version of Luthor became the template for sophisticated comic book villains for decades to come. The real victory was establishing a precedent that would influence his entire remaining career. From that point forward, studios and directors understood completely that hiring Gene Hackman meant accepting his artistic vision without question. There would be no negotiations, no compromises, and absolutely no exceptions to his creative authority. The Superman films made hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide, validating Hackman's uncompromising approach and cementing his reputation as an actor who could literally rewrite established characters through sheer force of will and artistic integrity. By 2001, Gene Hackman had spent 3 decades systematically terrorizing sets, walking off productions, and forcing Hollywood's most powerful figures to bend completely to his will. At 71, he remained one of the most feared and respected actors in the industry. His final major performance in The Royal Tenenbaums would become a masterclass in both his transcendent artistic genius and his devastating capacity for psychological destruction. The production brought together all of Hackman's greatest strengths and most dangerous tendencies in one volatile package. Working with young director Wes Anderson provided the perfect target for his need to dominate and control, while the complex character of Royal Tenenbaum offered exactly the kind of morally ambiguous role he had spent his career mastering. But this time, something was fundamentally different. The industry was changing around him, and a new generation of filmmakers was less willing to tolerate his behavior, no matter how brilliant the results. Anderson's meticulous, controlling directorial style represented everything Hackman had come to despise about modern filmmaking. Where Hackman valued spontaneity, instinct, and immediate artistic truth, Anderson demanded endless rehearsals, precise framing, and obsessive attention to visual details that seemed to prioritize style over authentic performance. The clash was immediate, brutal, and completely inevitable. Hackman's campaign of psychological warfare against Anderson became the stuff of Hollywood legend, a masterclass in professional intimidation that left even seasoned crew members shocked by its systematic cruelty. His verbal assaults were so vicious and personal that people who had worked with the most difficult stars in the business found themselves questioning whether they should intervene. When he wasn't actively intimidating Anderson with profanity-laced tirades, Hackman was undermining his authority through strategic silences, hostile body language, and deliberate acts of disrespect designed to humiliate the director in front of the entire cast and crew. Yet the performance that emerged from this toxic environment was absolutely extraordinary. Hackman's Royal Tenenbaum was a lying, manipulative patriarch who somehow remained sympathetic despite his terrible behavior. A character study so complex and nuanced that it seemed to comment on Hackman's own relationship with authority and family. It was classic Hackman artistry, finding humanity in monstrosity while never excusing the damage his character caused, creating sympathy for someone fundamentally unsympathetic through sheer force of charisma and emotional intelligence. Critics recognized the brilliance immediately. Rolling Stone called it one of the greatest American actors of all time at his finest, while other publications noted how Hackman managed to make Royal both despicable and lovable. The performance earned him a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Musical or Comedy, and stands as perhaps his most complex and psychologically sophisticated work. But the cost was enormous and ultimately unsustainable. By the end of filming, Hackman had alienated much of the crew, traumatized Anderson, and created an atmosphere so toxic that several key personnel requested never to work with him again. The whispers in Hollywood grew louder and more insistent. Was Gene Hackman finally more trouble than he was worth? The answer came with devastating swiftness. In 2004, after completing one final, forgettable film called Welcome to Mooseport, Hackman announced his retirement from acting. He was 74 years old and had spent over 4 decades proving that uncompromising artistic vision could coexist with impossible, destructive behavior. His final years were spent in Santa Fe, New Mexico, pursuing solitary creative endeavors, writing novels and painting, activities that required no collaboration, no compromise, and most importantly, no conflict with other artists. On February 26, 2025, he was found dead alongside his wife Betsy in their home. He was 95 years old. The tributes poured in from across Hollywood, revealing the complex legacy he'd created. Even those he'd tormented acknowledged his genius while carefully avoiding specifics about their personal experiences working with him. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.